We begin today with a very interesting session on animal tourism, how organizations can help tourist operators to move away from animal tourism and towards alternate models. Today we have with us three esteemed speakers. To begin with, Daniel Turner, who is the co-founder and director ANIMONDIAL. Daniel, a very warm welcome to you. We also have Jackie Bennett, who is the program director, Africa and Asia Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, and Dave Neale, director of Animal Welfare, Animals Asia Foundation. So to begin with, I hand over the floor to Daniel, but before that, a brief introduction about him. Daniel has worked with the global travel industry for almost 2 decades, initially as tourism lead at the Born Free Foundation, and most recently as director of the specialist consultancy ANIMONDIAL. Taking a pragmatic approach, he has been at the forefront of travel industry guidance and policy development, and advocates animal-friendly travel where tourism is part of the solution. Over to you, Daniel.
To Asia for Animals for this opportunity. As part of this focus on animals in tourism, I aim to explain why I believe tourism is part of the solution to better protect animals and nature. I am Daniel Turner, co-founder and director of ANIMONDIAL, a consultancy specializing in animal-friendly tourism and social impact. For over 20 years, I have been working to advance animal protection, and particularly in the field of travel and tourism. Establishing ANIMONDIAL a few years ago with Helen, we combined social impact expertise with environmental and animal welfare science to provide capacity building support for NGOs and impartial advice and practical guidance to the travel industry. You'll be aware that there are many different types of activities with animals in tourism. In fact, up to 60% of all excursions involve animals. Some of these are based on cultural practices, whilst others have been created for tourism. They do tend to fall within 3 distinct areas. There's the wild animals in a captive environment, and that includes zoos and animal sanctuaries, marine parks, elephant camps. There's the viewing of wildlife in their wild environment, whether that is on land or below water. And there's also the domesticated animals that are generally used to carry people or loads. Overall, tour operators and travel agents decide what to sell and what not to sell, purchasing those excursions and activities that are suitable for the tour, their brand, and perhaps their animal protection policy. There are, however, animals that fall outside that direct control. These include animals in marketplaces, outside hotels, on beaches, in tourist hotspots, those that are available to eat or hold for a selfie. In these instances, tour operators may be able to influence change, but are unlikely to be able to stop it. Managed poorly, without safeguards in place, tourism can exploit animals, place people at risk, and compromise an animal's welfare or survival. Tourism can proliferate the very problems we all strive to overcome. Tourism can also be a force for good, bringing value to animals and ensuring their protection. During the pandemic lockdowns, animal hunting soared as tourism ceased. Local people needed to subsidize lost income. However, recognizing that tourism generates huge revenues, supports millions of livelihoods and whole economies, it can be mastered as an influencer of meaningful change. So, as animal protection NGOs, how can you positively engage tourism and bring about meaningful change? Encourage tour operators and travel agents to establish their own animal protection commitment. Explain it to their colleagues and customers, and at the same time as thinking about animals, think about the people involved too. How could the tourism sector help bring an end to animal exploitation? Recognize its influence in the destination, the ability to influence better enforcement, or perhaps bring an end to cruel practices. For example, ANIMONDIAL is working with Four Paws International to engage the travel industry to influence an end to the dog and cat meat trade. Asking a tour operator to drop an activity is not necessarily the best approach, as this may actually cause more harm than good. Instead, positively engage operators and their suppliers to develop and drive forward solutions, protecting animals and local livelihoods, whilst offering animal-friendly options. For example, could tourism provide a solution for the 4,000 captive cetaceans currently held in inland tanks? Or develop an animal-friendly experience involving the 10,000 plus conditioned elephants locked in tourism? ANIMONDIAL is working with stakeholders, including NGOs, to identify such solutions. Why not benefit from financial or in-kind support from travel businesses? Funding projects, rescuing animals, and supporting your important work. This is an affordable service provided through ANIMONDIAL's Animal Protection Network. So, what are your take-homes? Tourism can exploit animals and proliferate the problems. However, if managed well, tourism can be a force for good. Asking businesses to drop certain activity may not be the best option for the animals involved. Work with the businesses to better protect the animals and safeguard local people's livelihoods. Finally, benefit from working with the travel businesses, not working against them. Do check out ANIMONDIAL. We're very much here to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for those very important insights and those valuable tips. And we'll come back to you with a host of questions once the sessions is over and we have had all the presentations in. So we now move to Jackie. Jackie Bennett joined the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries in 2012, and she is the Program Director for Africa and Asia. In the course of her work, she has visited sanctuaries in countries throughout Africa and Asia, learning about each center's unique goals and challenges. Jackie is an attorney who has practiced also as a litigator before entering the non-profit sector. More recently, she returned to school and earned her MS in non-profit management from Columbia University. Jackie, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jackie Bennett and I'm the Program Director for Africa and Asia with the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, or GFAS. I'm honored to be presenting today along with Daniel and Dave on the topic of animal tourism. For those of you not familiar with GFAS, I wanted to first give a little background about our organization. GFAS is a nonprofit organization based in the United States and with a global mission to help sanctuaries help animals. Our primary work is our accreditation program for sanctuaries, in which organizations are evaluated according to standards that cover areas of animal care, safety, and operations. We also offer other resources like webinars and workshops. At GFAS, we define the term sanctuary broadly. This includes centers that provide lifetime care to their animals that may have been confiscated from the exotic pet trade or rescued from entertainment or other sources. It also includes rescue and transition facilities that may have some animals in lifetime care, but also seek permanent adoptive homes for certain species, such as farmed animals or horses. And to be clear, we don't support adoption or private ownership of wild animals like tigers or primates. And finally, our definition of sanctuary includes wildlife rehabilitation centers that care for animals to prepare them to be returned to the wild. Currently, we have around 200 certified GFAS sanctuaries in 18 countries, and these include wildlife centers, equine rescues, and farm sanctuaries. Regardless of their location and species, they all meet basic principles of a true sanctuary, including no commercial trade of animals, no invasive research on animals, and no direct contact between the visiting public and wildlife. And we'll talk about that last point today. Under GFAS standards, it's perfectly acceptable for sanctuaries to offer tours or other visitation to the public, and even to charge an admission fee for this if certain conditions are met. Tours shouldn't jeopardize animal welfare, and so they should be done carefully to minimize the impact on animals, not cause the animals stress, and give them the ability to retreat from view if they choose. Tours should also have a goal of educating the public. Any visitation should be done in a way that ensures everyone's safety, both human and non-human. Direct contact with wild animals not only poses a risk of injury, but also transmission of diseases. And tourism activities shouldn't mislead visitors about the natural behavior of the wild animals being viewed by offering activities like petting lion cubs or other uses of animals in entertainment. These activities, in addition to not being in the animal's best interest, can also make wildlife seem desirable as pets and fuel the wildlife trade. The issue in this presentation is how organizations can work with tourist operators to help them move away from animal tourism that exploits animals and towards alternative models. GFAS's position is that animal tourism is not in itself wrong if it's done responsibly and ethically. In order to move toward an ethical tourism model, we believe there are 3 important steps. The first is communicating with tourist operators. And I know my co-presenters agree that it won't work to point fingers at them or be confrontational with those tourist operators who continue to promote activities that exploit animals. Sharing information and educating is important though, and there's a lot of information written about how harmful some activities are. For example, just earlier this year, the IUCN Primate Specialist Group published best practice guidelines for responsible images of non-human primates. Now, this is a very well-sourced piece that explains how primates that are used for photo props were likely illegally seized in the wild and are likely to live very poor conditions. The guidelines also emphasize that those who have these animals in captivity, including zoos and sanctuaries, as well as tour guides, they have the greatest platform to deliver appropriate messages about these animals, why they're in captivity, and why they shouldn't be considered as pets. At GFAS, we've worked with several organizations as they define their animal welfare policies, and we're happy to say our standards have provided guidance. This includes the company Expedia, which reached out to GFAS as they were undertaking a review of policies with regard to activities involving animals. Through our collaboration, we helped Expedia to better understand sanctuaries and how they could incorporate sanctuaries work into their policies. GFAS is now a partner advocacy group with Expedia. And tourism companies like Expedia that have a global presence are coming to understand that they shouldn't be promoting activities that exploit animals and are able to share that message to a large audience. Another important step is education and outreach to the public. At GFAS, we strive to give recognition to the sanctuaries that operate ethically and to educate the public about the difference between a true sanctuary and other facilities that may call themselves sanctuaries or conservation centers. And we all know what to look for. Is the center breeding animals in captivity, but not releasing them, so there's a constant supply of baby animals? Is it selling opportunities to hold wildlife or take pictures with them, walk with lions, ride elephants, etc.? We frequently receive emails from people planning travel and asking about ethical options, and we always welcome opportunities to steer the public away from pay-to-play activities that exploit animals. And we'll also direct people to other literature if they want to learn more, such as the very thorough reports from World Animal Protection about elephant tourism. By raising awareness, we hope that we can change minds so that the demand for unethical animal tourism drops. And with that, tourist operators will hopefully look for other options. Which leads us to the last step. In order to help tourist operators move away from unethical practices, organizations can provide and promote other ethical options. GFAS has collaborated with Airbnb to partner with our member sanctuaries to promote social impact experiences that are not pay to play and that put animal welfare first. Airbnb has published its animal welfare policies, and that includes a clear provision that sanctuaries cannot host experiences that use wild animals for direct interactions with travelers or in performances or shows. Several of our sanctuaries have hosted these experiences, some of them being for day tours and some allowing guests to stay overnight in guest lodgings. And the more that these kinds of experiences are available, the more likely they can crowd out the bad tourism options that exploit animals. And we've seen a lot of variety in what our member sanctuaries offer. And for many of these sanctuaries, the revenue from tours and other visitation is an important component of their annual budgets. Options can include guided tours in which visitors hear about what brought the animals into captivity and how much work goes into providing them with care. Raised viewing platforms can allow members of the public to watch animals in a non-invasive way. One of our member sanctuaries, the Wild Animal Sanctuary, located in the United States, has built a mile into the wild walkway across its very large facilities. So visitors can walk across and look down to see the bears, tigers, and other species without disturbing the animals. In normal times, as opposed to COVID times that we've been in, this sanctuary will see more than 170,000 visitors a year. So that's a lot of people walking across their walkway. And some organizations have established paid volunteer programs that allow the public to engage in a meaningful and ethical way, spending a day, a week, or even a few months helping the sanctuary to prepare food and maintain the facilities so they can be part of the animals' lives without engaging in the activities that exploit animals. In the UK, the Wild Futures Monkey Sanctuary offers the opportunity to be a keeper for a day. Working alongside the trained staff, these volunteers, who do pay for the experience, get to watch the monkeys up close. But it is stipulated that there is no direct contact with the monkeys at any point during the day. And at the Lilongwe Wildlife Center in Malawi, members of the public can register to volunteer for up to 12 weeks with no prior experience required. Again, this wildlife center makes clear that there is a strict hands-off policy with regard to the animals, most of which are being rehabilitated for release to the wild. Now, we know it takes time to effect change, but we're hopeful for the future. Around the world, we're seeing NGOs collaborate to raise awareness about issues in ethical animal tourism, and alliances like the Asia for Animals Coalition forming. GFAS supports those efforts and continues to be a voice for sanctuaries to make the public aware of their important work and the opportunities that sanctuaries provide for education and ethical animal tourism. Thank you again. I'm happy to answer your questions, and GFAS also has a virtual exhibitor booth at this conference. So please stop by and there'll be some information if you'd like to learn more about our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, for that wonderful presentation and those fantastic insights. Our next speaker is Dave Neale, Director of Animal Welfare, Animals Asia Foundation. Dave leads a series of animal welfare campaigns aimed at improving the welfare of captive wild animals in China and Vietnam, working in partnership with the China Association of Zoological Gardens and wildlife rescue centers in Vietnam to implement management training initiatives for animal managers and vets, as well as enclosure improvements. Dave leads a campaign to end elephant riding in Vietnam and has established the country's first ethical elephant tourism experience in partnership with the Yok Don National Park. Over to you, Dave.
Hello, I'm Dave Neale, the Animal Welfare Director for Animals Asia Foundation, and I'm delighted to be with you all here on this Asia for Animals online conference. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to be talking to you today about our work to partner within Vietnam to develop alternative elephant tourism models. So firstly, just a little bit of background on what the issue is. Well, there are a number of elephants which are being used in riding tourism, which is causing some significant welfare problems. There is a family tradition of using elephants within this region, which has gone on for many years. And the tourism is providing those families with a substantial amount of their income. And elephants are also being used in local festivals, which are also causing some significant welfare problems. Our aim was really to try to, where possible, provide these elephants with as much freedom as possible, which is not always possible within the current methods of tourism. And also to maintain an income for the elephant owners to ensure that this was a program which would be sustainable over time, whilst continuing to, as where possible, respect those family and those local traditions. So just some background on the area that we're working within. We're in the central highlands of Vietnam in a province called Dak Lak province. And this is the area where they are with the highest wild elephant population. And these are elephants within the Yok Don National Park. Over many years, many of those elephants have been removed from the wild and they've been used within tourism. Initially, they were used, many elephants were removed to be used within forestry, but then as forestry activities came to an end, then the owners switched to the elephant riding tourism. And also the use in the local festivals, which have a significance for this area, where elephants are often used in very taxing conditions, performing for riding, but also carrying out, being forced to race and play football, and obviously suffering some significant welfare problems because of the activities that they're being asked to participate within. This is a typical scene within the area. Here you can see an elephant being ridden to a riding camp by its mahout, and just going down the main road. So this shows that the local community are very much used to seeing elephants as part of their daily lives. And here on the left is a painting on a local school, which shows again that elephants are being used to being ridden and are being seen more as a domestic animal than a wild animal. And this is something that we saw when we started working in the region, and we saw that it was going to be a challenge for us to try to address this, to try to change this perception of elephants away from being this domesticated animal to being a wild animal that we needed to look out and to meet its natural needs and its natural behaviors. So to do this, then we knew we needed to build a partnership within the region, and just some of the main organizations are the Elephant Conservation Centre. This is a organisation set up by the government to care for elephants. They're currently caring for these two rescued orphaned elephants. The provincial government, which is the Daklak provincial government, which actually give the authority and the permits to allow people to carry out tourism activities. The Yokdon National Park Authority itself, which is where there are the wild elephants, but also they have a tourism program. And then the district people's committees, which obviously have a lot of influence in terms of what happens within the local area. We need to build trust with the elephant owners themselves, as well as the tour operators and major community representatives who all have some stake within either the elephants themselves or within the tourism activities which happen within this region. So initially we offered advice in terms of veterinary support. So the Elephant Conservation Centre vets, we supported in terms of providing veterinary training and providing support for them so that they could treat some of the elephants within the local community. And this helped us to build some trust, both within the government and also within the elephant owners and tourism operators. We then brought all of these major stakeholders together. And this was really important because we wanted to make it clear that we were not here to simply prevent people from earning money, but actually we wanted to continue, wanted to help them to continue to raise money through using their elephants, but to fundamentally change the way in which that was carried out. And this happened through this conference, which was sponsored by the Olsen Animal Trust, and it allowed us to all come together to talk about these issues and the welfare problems the elephants were facing, as well as for everybody to work towards a common goal of finding new solutions. And the first step in that was then back in July 2018, when we were asked by the Yokdon National Park to actually sign an agreement to set up the first elephant-friendly tourism model within the region. And here we are signing that agreement. And this impacted these 3 elephants. So the Yokdon National Park had 3 elephants, which were based in the national park. The tourists could come in and ride these elephants. These are the 3 elephants now. This is Bunkam, Ikun, and Tongnang, all of which now, under this agreement, are free to roam within the national park during the day. And tourists come into the national park, and rather than paying to ride them, they now pay to go out into the national park with a guide to find the elephant and then to observe them in the wild. And we've since added additional elephants to this program. So this is important why we can get support from local elephant owners so that we can bring more elephants into this program and to show that this can become something as a new model for the region in terms of changing the model away from elephant riding to elephant observation. And I mentioned earlier the importance of the working in education. We also installed an education program with a dedicated education officer who continues now to go into the schools within the region to talk about elephants and to try to change that idea of elephants really being there as an income generator and a more of a domesticated animal back into elephants being a wild animal and the individuals that they see and they've grown up with being wild animals and thus needing to meet the needs of these as wild animals. And going back to that original photo or the original picture I showed from the school, then what we've started to do with these schools is to physically change the walls here by providing a new painting, removing the old painting away from the children seeing this as something which was normal with children riding elephants back into elephants being out in the wild themselves. And what we're now doing is we're in negotiations with local elephant owners in other regions of this area to start to set up alternative tourism models. And we're also in continued negotiations with the local government to actually sign a memorandum of understanding which will commit the government to ending elephant riding in this region and working with us and all of the tour operators and elephant owners to actually set up these alternative tourism models, which are going to be so important. So that's it. We've developed very good relationships. It's been incredibly important for us to work positively within this region, incredibly important for us to take it very slowly and to show that we have a commitment to this program for the long term, and also to show that to actually develop a program such as we've done in the Yokdal National Park, which can be financially sustainable, so that we can then replicate that program in other areas of the region, and we can then show that there is an alternative to the elephant riding model, which actually brings income in for people, but also provides better welfare outcomes for the elephants. I'd like to thank the Olsen Animal Trust for supporting this program, and also thank you all and the Asia for Animals Coalition for giving me the opportunity to speak at this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those great presentations, and we are now accepting questions for our esteemed speakers, and we already have some with us. So the first question is that behavioral change is an integral part which leads to sustainable change, but usually this faces resistance. The question here is, what is the biggest challenge, according to you, that one could face or faces while initiating the same? That's the question. Who would like to address it first?
I'm happy to chip in there. I think the biggest challenge actually is how different cultures see animals in a tourism context. I mean, I take the example of elephants because obviously Dave's just left us with those thoughts. And what we're seeing in other parts of Asia, where the camps that offer experiences to Westerners do not include the riding engagement and instead use other interactions. But those same camps for Asian travelers still offer the elephant riding as well as the interactions. So whilst it's been reported that the camps are no longer offering riding, well, that's the case definitely for Westerners, but not the case for Asian travelers. And so that, for me, is the biggest issue, is this kind of cultural divide that still drives certain providers to provide demand rather than offering something that's more animal friendly.
And I think that's very difficult to sort of say bring about in terms of change, right? Because that's so deeply rooted. And it's actually also challenging. Behavioral change, any which ways, is challenging. Dave, I still recall that transition from the painting that depicted the riding of on the elephants to elephants, just free, playing around, having a good time. That's also a very strong visual that supports behavioral change. How challenging what are your thoughts on that in terms of behavioral change?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think it has been really important for us. That was one of the main things that you could see when you went to this region, when we started working in the Daklak region. One of the things was that the imagery for the children every single day was a negative image. And I think this is important, not just in the situation with elephants, but just in life in general, in that, we're presented with these negative images of animals without really thinking about them all of the time in all societies, and that normalizes situations. For the elephants here, then that was a particular issue for us, and that was something that we wanted to try to address, and we still got a long way to address that. But obviously, through the education program, then if we can start to change minds from the primary schools, then hopefully that idea of elephants being there as a sort of as a commodity to be used in the way that it was being used, the way that they were being used, will begin to change. But I agree very much with Daniel in that the biggest problem we have within this region at the moment is actually the Vietnamese tourism is still very much demanding elephant riding tourism. And so that is our challenge. We can set these models up, which we have done, and it's a relatively successful model at the moment. But it still needs to, we need to attract the local tourists to be able to carry out this model and to choose to carry out that model, carry out the new ethical elephant model rather than going on the elephant riding. And I think that goes back that's a bigger challenge because, we have to then bring in the ideas of animal welfare and the animal concepts which haven't been based in people's education being brought up. So that is a bigger challenge for us, but it's something which we are beginning to tackle. Fortunately, we're seeing a lot of support from the owners and from the government in this region to transition. Obviously, as long as we can provide an income, then they're very happy to be able to transition to these new models. But the biggest challenge is the general public at the moment.
I think you made a very...
I think
please go ahead.
The important thing to state there is that Dave mentioned that that people have those images of the negative interaction, but they don't consider them as negative. That's the outreach that's necessary through the local NGOs is to explain why that activity is negative. And I think the assumption that people are just proliferating something that they know is negative is completely false. Most people don't know that activity is having a negative impact on those animals. And I think it's that educational process of engagement, not criticism, engagement that's so vital in all of this to see actually meaningful change for the long term.
Absolutely, Daniel. And I think since Daniel and Dave have highlighted this very important point of education, generation of awareness, and to begin with the decision makers of tomorrow or the children of today or the students of today. Jackie, you also mentioned education as a point in your presentation. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Well, I kind of echo what Daniel and Dave both said about awareness. I think we who work in animal protection areas sometimes, and I speak for myself, kind of take it for granted that people know what an endangered species means or what a keystone species means, and people don't. Can't blame them. They're not working in this area the way we are. And so, for example, we are speaking to people about ethical tourism and what they should be planning on vacation. It's an opportunity to explain to them what elephant rides really mean and how that elephant is handled and trained to be able to give that ride, and it really is an eye-opener. So I think, as Daniel said, it's constant education and making people aware of what these activities really involve, because they don't know.
Thank you, Jackie. And that brings me to the next question, which is striking a balance between a livelihood and animal rights is a delicate one. And one has to actually really work hard towards achieving this delicate balance. My question is, rather the question is, what are the important lessons learned in this journey of trying to enable individuals to strike a balance between livelihood and animal rights, to empower them to move towards that? Daniel, would you like to go first?
I mean, from my side, people are very much involved in everything. I mean, not just the animals that they own. And we know on the elephant front, but also equines, camels. There's a whole host of, in zoos, in certain sanctuaries, the animals are owned, and you can't get away from that. There's legislation, or there may not be legislation, but ultimately they're owned. And so whatever the solution is, the owners have to be part of that solution. You can't just assume that the animals will go back into the wild. I mean, that's just thinking completely in an idealistic way, which I'm afraid we don't live in that world. And so the owners, the tour operators, the suppliers, they all have to be part of that discussion. They all have to understand the journey that is necessary to go from where you currently are to where you want to be, and why, and bring everybody with you in that journey. So I'm afraid the owner is integral to that. And obviously, as Jackie was saying, as Dave was saying, is that they need to have a benefit to that. You can't just appeal to look after their animal. They need to actually recognize why, and a sustainable income obviously is a reason why. So there has to be benefits for all, not just the animals.
And thank you, Daniel. And your consultancy right now, your consulting agency right now, ANIMONDIAL, especially in today's COVID-19 times, when there is so much of challenge thrown at tourism in particular, it's become even more difficult, right, to strike that balance?
Well, I mean, as far as sort of paying clients, there's a lack of those. But, during the COVID time, we've been able to do a whole host of education and webinars and trainings, which we're providing pro bono, because ultimately we want to see responsible tourism. And I think COVID, and obviously how it has come about, has helped drive the interest. People get it now, or starting to get it, that exploitation of animals and nature has negative repercussions, and ultimately for the sustainability of their businesses, they want to do the right thing and are keen to understand how to do that. So that's very much our mandate, is to not criticize, encourage, engage, educate, and encourage a more animal-friendly tourism. Tourism has to be part of the solution. You can't remove tourism. That is the driver, that is the income revenue that is going to make these solutions happen.
Jackie, at the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, how has the pandemic affected the way you reach out to people? Like Daniel just said, that there are a lot of virtual training programs that are conducted, and so on and so forth. What is your take on this? How has that changed in today's time and age of the pandemic?
Well, in terms of our own work, we of course try to support our member sanctuaries, and many of them have struggled through the pandemic because they do rely on tourism and visitation dollars. What I have seen also is because, and of course those are more ethical tourism options being offered, but because of the pandemic, they had to shut their doors like everyone else. And, we've actually seen our members become very creative in how they try to reach out and provide virtual tours, use social media a lot, and find other ways to kind of reach out and gain new supporters and do their outreach and education and make those connections without any direct contact, any closeness between people and animals, which has been good to see.
Dave, how, according to you, can tourism serve the cause of animal rights? Do you have any take on that?
Yeah, I think as the other speakers have said, it's integral, really. I mean, Daniel said it very well in terms of, you know, the animals that we're looking towards helping and improving their lives are owned by somebody, and that situation isn't going to change. And so therefore we have to work alongside the owners to try to bring about new ways of raising income, earning income with these animals. And that's something which, you know, as you've seen, that this is something that we're doing with the program that we've got with the elephants. We've the lessons learned to be able to do that, to get to that situation, I suppose, and anybody that's thinking of setting up a similar program, is really to take things very slowly, to go at the pace of the local community, and to not instantly expect things to change straight away, and to try to build a presence, and a positive presence within a region. Animals Asia's fortunate in that, you know, we've been operating in Vietnam for many years, and working very positively with the government on other programs related to wild animals, particularly our bears. And so therefore we already had a positive relationship with the government, at least, and we could then build upon that by working in this specific region. And the people in that region could see that we'd already operated programs elsewhere very successfully. But that really was the most important thing, I think, in terms of just offering support to people. As you saw, we initially just offered advice in terms of managing their own elephants, and supporting organizations and working within the government to actually provide veterinary support for those elephants. Despite the fact those elephants were still being used in elephant riding, you know, we needed to gain the trust of the elephant owners and the government, the local government, to show that we were there specifically for the welfare of those elephants, regardless of how they were being used. And I think that was particularly important, because then from providing that support, then we started to see that the elephant owners themselves wanted to discuss with us how we could work with them further to change the tourism model. So it really is just building that trust and taking things slowly. But yeah, ultimately, you know, the tourism has to be part of the solution for improving animal welfare. As Daniel said, you know, we can't remove all these elephants from the elephant owners and put them into this non-existent area. You know, it just isn't there, unfortunately. You know, we have to find a way that people can continue to earn an income, just in an alternative way.
I think, Dave, you made many interesting points there. I think, but one thing that stood out for me was slow and steady. So I think building trust is an extremely it's a difficult process. It's a long drawn process. There are a lot of discussions. There's a lot of back and forth, exchange of ideas, open communication channels. So my question to you, and to also Daniel and Jackie, is how difficult is it? And it must be really long drawn, and it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. What impact does it have on you as individuals, on your teams? And what is the one point that one should follow?
I'm not really sure there's any kind of one point that anyone can follow. I think it is just a case. I mean, every situation is going to be different. Every individuals that you come across is going to be different. And, you know, you can put as much effort as you want into some people and you'll never get the desired outcome. But ultimately, I think, you know, bringing those people together, you know, as early on as possible. As you saw, you know, we started to work within this region, and then we brought people together for a couple of days as sort of a workshop conference, which really was there to try to reassure the elephant owners and the tourism operators that we were not trying to close them down. We were concerned that, you know, there's a lot of discussion about elephant riding internationally, and there's a lot of criticism, obviously, about the conditions that elephants are being kept in, and the treatment that people the way that these elephants have been treated. And so therefore, we wanted to be sure that the community knew that we were not simply there to try to stop them from earning money. And therefore we brought lots of people in who had already set up new models from different parts of Asia to talk about those models. So it was giving options and giving people hope that, yes, things needed to change, but this is the way that we wanted them to change. And I think that's really the only way you can do it. You have to be able to offer something to somebody and then say, we're here for the long term to help you to get to that point. Yes, okay, they can, obviously people understand that you are putting a certain amount of pressure on the situation because you want it to change for the betterment for the animals, but also you're offering that continued support and advice.
Thank you, Dave. Jackie, Daniel, would you like to add to what Dave just said? Any points from your end on your experiences?
Jackie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, Daniel. When I was listening to the presentations yesterday, and particularly Jesse's great presentation about factory farming, I thought a lot of what was being discussed also applies to this topic of how do you change people's minds about animal tourism. And when Jesse was talking about the holistic approach, being strategic in communications with lawmakers and kind of having a big tent, bringing activists together for a sense of community. I think the same thing applies here. From my perspective and the work that we do, we're trying to promote ethical animal experiences. We want to make sure that the sanctuaries that are our members are acting ethically. But we're one voice that can collaborate with others and make that voice louder and just continue to raise the awareness, continue to educate in a non-judgmental way, have more people then pick that up and carry that further. And it is a slow process, but it does see change.
Absolutely. Daniel?
I think my suggestion is don't make assumptions. I think, it's really important to go into all conversations with an open mind. Don't just assume that that whoever you're talking to already knows about the animal, about the activity, about the cultural practice, whatever the topic is. So I think it's assumptions are often the problem, is that you assume that the person is applying cruelty. You assume that that the person who's keeping the animal knows the best food for the animal. And I think that is often incorrect. So I think it's really important to go into any conversation with an open mind, to provide the education, evidenced education, not just opinion. It has to be evidence. And you should also try to provide impartial advice. And I know that's fairly difficult for NGOs with policy line, but this is one of the reasons why I left Born Free and created ANIMONDIAL, is to provide that impartial approach. And certainly the travel industry appreciates that, because then they can make an informed decision. You can't make an informed decision on only one side of the argument. So that's why ANIMONDIAL has a place, is that we can act as a conduit between all the different players and bring all those different players together. So I echo very much what Jackie and Dave said about the importance of collaboration, engagement. And I have to say, and we all have to do this, is persevere. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I imagine I'm going to be doing it for a few more years to come, and it's, we're all dedicated to what we do, and it is about perseverance and just keeping positive. So be positive.
Thank you for that great answer. And we have time for one more question, which is as follows. Travelers to tour operators have ceased sale of elephant interactions due to negative publicity. What is your view of these activities, and do they still have a place in tourism? That's the question. Open floor.
I think if I'm getting the question right, then yes, the tourism with elephants still is something which will continue. It's just in the formats that we're trying to change. As we said before, then there isn't some magic wand that we can wave to bring all these elephants into a magical area that doesn't exist. They have to be managed in a much better way, and if we can open up opportunities through new tourism models which respect the animals and give those animals some freedom about what their day looks like, that's really what we're trying to achieve here. Then tourism can continue, and people can continue to be in the presence of these animals without impacting them in a seriously negative way. And that is really the challenge, and that's why every situation is going to be different, because everybody's availability of resources is different. I mean, we've set up our program in the Yokdon National Park, which has a lot of natural resources, which is great. So we can bring elephants into this large area where the elephants can roam, and they can access food, and they have a lot of choices. But there are other areas within this region where we don't have that natural forest area, and we need to think of different ways of actually providing better welfare for those elephants and providing a tourism experience for people to come and see those elephants. So every situation is very different, but elephant tourism in the sense is here for the long term.
Yes, I would completely echo that. I mean, if you look at numbers, Thailand, 4,700 conditioned elephants. I mean, these are owned elephants. They have been trained in a variety of ways, but ultimately they're locked in tourism. In Myanmar, you're looking at 6,000 elephants that are all conditioned. They have all come from the timber trade, like in Thailand, illegal logging was legalized. And so those animals had to find another solution, something for them to do. And they're owned. They can't just be let into the wild, and they're likely to cause more issues if they are. So the solution is tourism, but it has to be animal-friendly tourism. And I think this, the knee-jerk reaction that we had from the elephant riding boycott was a lot of the facilities changed their activities overnight and actually changed them so they're actually worse for the animals and certainly worse for the people interacting with them. So that's not the solution. The solution has to be something where all stakeholders are involved, and that animal welfare ultimately and people welfare has to be the priorities to guide the way forward. But this knee-jerk thing of boycott is just not the way to do it, because it caused more harm than good.
Absolutely. Jackie?
Well, I mean, I echo what they said, that tourism is part of the solution. And, tourism that's done ethically with an educational component is the way that these species are going to be saved. People
Wonderful.
have to be aware of it and understand them to save them.
Wonderful. So we are almost at the end of the session, and we thank you for those wonderful presentations, inputs, and your time, the effort that you put in. Dave, Daniel, Jackie, you were simply superb, and such great inputs, and I'm sure the audience is going to benefit hugely from those insights. Please do visit Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. They are our esteemed exhibitor. Do visit the exhibitors during the breaks. You'll have lots and lots of things to take away from them. And thank you once again, Dave and Daniel, and hope that you stay, if you can, for the rest of the sessions. Thank you so much for being with us.